Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today we're going to be ranking all of my grungy eyeshadow palettes. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. 'Tis the season, well almost, we're in September, fall is upon us, and there isn't a better color story for the fall time than a murky, grungy, sort of in-betweeny kind of eyeshadow. They are some of my favorites, so I have quite a bit here. I think I'm even missing a couple. I did, of course, my top 10 favorite grunge palettes as part of Eyeshadow Palette Month, so you can check that as well. I didn't check to see whether what I've selected now for my top 10 is the same as that, but that's because when I choose a top 10, I like what are my really true favorites. And here it's sort of like I'm always making the decision based on, like, if I compare it to other things I have here lying in front of me, then this is what I would pick as my top 10. So I have 28 palettes to show you, so let me get to it. And the first palette I have to be very careful with. If you saw my eyeshadow palette collection, you know that I have decided to no longer use this guy. This is the Klarity Cosmetics Deadly Rose palette, and I have to keep it flat because, as you will see, I hope it doesn't get all over my couch and myself. The green shadow in the bottom keeps breaking on me, and this shadow right here is starting to puff up the way the green one did before it shattered into a million pieces. Yes, I did repress it. Yes, I tried different binding agents. There is no saving this. Eyeshadow should not do this, even though this is a really pretty grungy color story. And Klarity Cosmetics is a brand that does really lovely grungy color stories. So I did want to include it here, but that's why it's all the way in the bottom, because I cannot deal with this in my life. I'm going to be putting this back really carefully. Then here in the bottom as well are some brands that are no longer available, even though some of my favorite grunge palettes will be in the top 10, even though they have been discontinued, because they're just solids. But these two by Shroud Cosmetics. Shroud Cosmetics is no longer with us. The brand was closed down, I think, late last year. The Moonfall is perhaps the grungiest offering that I have by them still in my collection. This is really beautiful. I still rate this really highly, but because the brand is no longer available, I didn't want to rank these any higher. And then this is the It's Freaking Bats. That was their collab with Betty Bean, and this is that palette. I always mention how I like using these in conjunction. I don't use these a whole lot. That's also why they're ranked in the lower half. With a lot of Shroud palettes that they released later, I ended up finding out that a lot of the shades didn't go together when they were in the same palette the way I would want it to go onto my lid. So that's why I rate these a little less highly than some of the other things I have in this grungy palette collection. By the way, if you want to see swatches for all of these, I have swatches up for all of these whenever I did them for a review, so you can go to the main channel and just type in the palette plus the word review and it will pop up, so you can find it right there. Huda Beauty's Pretty Grunge. When I did my top 10, someone mentioned in the comments how this is their favorite grunge palette. I feel that this is grunge mainly because of the name. What it is a really good smoky eye palette. It's got some cool tones in, a little bit of warmth, but as you will see as we continue in the ranking, when it comes to a grunge eyeshadow palette, I want there to be a little bit more color that is a little bit more like desaturated, muted, perhaps with a lot of gray or brown running through it. Those tend to be my favorite grunge eyeshadow palettes. This can definitely be grunge, especially if you love your neutrals and you don't want to venture into colorful things, then something like this can be very grungy too. But to me, this is like the safest option, and I would probably put this in a like cool toned or like glam ranking video more so than I would in a grunge eyeshadow palette ranking. But because it has it in the name and because someone was mentioning it in the comments, I was like, if I don't include it here, people will probably have questions. But that's why this is ranked in the bottom, because I don't feel this is as grungy as it could be. Another brand that does some lovely grungy things is Odin's Eye. This is the Jewels and Gem, which is again grungy, but like softer grungy. So this is what I mean with things being a little bit more colorful but desaturated at the same time. I've mentioned many times that Odin's Eye is one of those brands I want to love, but I can't, because once they change their formula, I just haven't been able to pick it up with brushes the way I want to, and that's just something that I wish they would bring back. So this is definitely a palette I really like the look of, but in practice and in use, it's not my favorite, which is why it's here. And I felt very similarly about this. This is the Bitten palette for Gourmand Girls. Again, a brand that does some really, really good grunge-looking color stories. And the Bitten palette, when it was released, like, it is more of like a rosy palette, but then it has these like grayish green sort of shades. So that was what really sort of makes me think of this as a grungy palette. It's quite deep and saturated. It's of course vampire inspired, so a lot of the reddish tones in here are a little bit more like leaning towards the color of actual blood. But overall, I felt that using this, it again wasn't my favorite formula. It's okay, it's really workable shadow, but it's just, compared to everything else I'm showcasing here today, I was a bit like, I have better things. I have other things that can do this for me that I like better. Another palette that I do really enjoy, but I have a color story that looks quite like this that I like a little bit better, but it's by Viseart. This is the Petit Four Violetta, and this is lovely. And for Viseart, this is quite grungy. It's got quite a bit of depth here. It's got some like burgundy shades with like grays and this really beautiful duochrome. So grunginess for Viseart, like they've done other things that I feel are a little bit grungy that are still coming up. So this is beautiful, but I have a Pat McGrath palette that I feel sort of fits the same bill that I like a little bit better. But the Viseart formula is one of my favorites. So this is one where I'm sort of knocking it down because I just have other things that I feel deliver the same thing. And that also goes for this. This is the Kaleidos, I always forget the name, Flowing Haze palette. And this is beautiful, but it's again sort of like more neutral leaning, so not as grungy as it could be. And even though, like, if you like that soft grunge sort of look, then you might like this. But for me, again, I like other things. And that brings us to our top 20. And number 20 is going to be my Devrune Witch of the Wildflower eyeshadow palette. This was released in the fall time, and it can be grungy, especially if you blend some of these shades together. We get to really nice dark shades, but I feel a shade like this and a shade like this pulls it more towards like a spring, vibrant sort of palette for me. So that's why it's not, again, as grungy as it could be. I feel similarly about the It's Freakin' Bats by Betty Bean and Shroud Cosmetics, but it does have these really beautiful, really deep sort of shades that can really bring this palette into that fall grunge vibe. But this is another one where I feel it could have been grungier. I think all the other palettes I have for you here today are all true grunge palettes in my book, but a lot of these are no longer available, and one of them is this one, and I don't use this a whole lot because the Baroque palette from ColourPop, as beautiful as this is, it's very unique with these grayish blue tones. I don't reach for this enough. I need to really put this in a Shop My Stash really soon because I just need to play with this again. It's really dark, really murky, yummy shades. I love the shade in the middle. It's a really, really cool duochrome. So it has a lot going for it. It's just one of those palettes where I always feel like I need to use it more often, and that's why it's in this lower half of the ranking. Number 18 is going to go to the Gemini 2. This is by Melt Cosmetics. I could have put all of my Melt palettes into this video because if there is a brand who has grunge colored eyeshadow color stories to it, like down to a T, it's going to be Melt Cosmetics, but I felt I had to be a little bit more selective, so I've selected 3. This is the Gemini 2, so this is the rosy one, and here you can see what I feel like really constitutes a grunge palette. Yes, it's deep and dark and murky, but it's colorful at the same time. What surprised me about this palette when I tried it is how much I actually liked these rosy tones that it has. Not my usual cup of tea, you could say, but it is really beautiful. It doesn't have enough shimmers for me, though. I want more shimmers. A palette that I'm currently putting in my Shop My Stash because I want to test it out again. I wasn't a huge fan of the formula in the Enchanted Autumn by Fantasy Cosmetica, Enchanted Autumn, I have to say it properly. This was their collab with Makeup Just for Fun, Amanda, here on YouTube and also on Instagram, I feel she's at. And this, I just really love this palette. And Fantasy Cosmetica is another brand where I feel a lot of their color stories are grunge themed, so I could have put in a lot more, but I selected this and one other one that I feel really have it down to a T. And this is beautiful. And I actually kept this over my Shroud Cosmetics Arcana palette that I used to own, because this is newer to me and it has a very similar color story, but I wasn't a huge fan of some of the shimmers in here. It didn't really pick up really well with a brush, but that's why I want to test it out again. Maybe I was just biased last year, so I want to give this palette another chance because I love this color story so much. It looks absolutely stunning, but this wasn't the Fantasy Cosmetica formula that I was used to. I did try the Harvest of Souls after that, and that did have the Fantasy Cosmetica palette, the like quality that I'm used to. So I think this was a fluke, but this is a really good color story. I really like the look of that one. A palette that was a little disappointing to me because once I got it in and I was playing with it, I was like, it's not as green and grungy as I'd like it to be, but a really good sort of like swampy green color story is the Undergrowth from Cosmic Beauty. This is so beautiful, but it all turned a little bit more vibrant than I had wanted. There's a lot of yellow and brown in here. So I do feel I have to like make the right combo for this to get like this swampy murkiness shining through completely. There are just a couple of shades that are a little bit too bright and not enough of them pull green on my complexion per se. So as beautiful as this is, again, this is why it's ranked a little bit lower than some other things in this video, because I do really rate the Cosmic Beauty formula. They do a really wonderful thing. And I think this is the grungiest thing they've done so far. I'm really curious to see how I feel about the Muse. I just got that in. You will have seen me showing you that in some videos last week. My haul, for instance, that went live on Saturday, because I think that can actually be the grungiest thing they've done. I just hadn't tried that palette yet. Next up is Subculture by ABH, a classic. This is probably what really put grunge tones on the map for me, and I'll probably select this again sometime soon. I always put this in either my October or my November Shop My Stash to go back to it and use it again. I especially like the mattes we get in this side of the palette, and I very often pair them with multi-chromes. I think that if you have a grunge palette like this one, where it's sort of like colorful yet toned down, that's where I really feel that grunge tones can really shine. And I love that we get like burgundy wine shades in here, like a little bit of plum. We have a greeny teal moment. We have some yellowy orange. There's a lot of options in here, and I feel that these mattes in particular make for really good pairings with a lot of my Cliona multichromes. So that's usually my go-to. I will use this together with some multichromes, and I feel like $1,000,000. The ColourPop Troublemaker palette. I'm not sure what's going to happen to this. It was no longer in stock on the website, so I hope they bring it back for the fall time. But this is really, really beautiful. It's sort of like if you want to amp up your Cloud 9, this can see you through. And here again, it's not just neutrals. You get these like rosy, plummy things and then some gray, blue leaning things. So this has a little bit more color, and I like this. And this is one of the ColourPop palettes that I feel has the good ColourPop quality as well. Not every single ColourPop palette is created equal. And I feel that this, because it has different shades, is actually more versatile than the Baroque. But now that I'm looking at this, I'm like, if I were to pair this with the Baroque, I could be onto something there. So maybe I have to select those together in my Shop My Stash when I do select them. What do you think? Next up, number 13 is going to be my Melt Gemini palette. This is such a lovely color story till this day. And I think that this is really when brands realize that these kind of tones work really well in eyeshadow. It just does. I especially like the greens in here. You can see that that's what I've reached for the most, especially that shimmer. But the like more neutral, like brown tones over on this side can make for a pretty easy eye if you're like just going like running errands or you don't want to wear a lot of makeup. And it can work really well for setting up the look and then pairing it with the greens to have them pop more. I feel that that works really well. But yeah, I tend to do the greens in this palette more so than anything else every single time I use it. And there is a brand, like a palette by a brand, that you will see in my top 10 in a second. that I feel is very similar to this, but I like that one a little bit better because it has better shimmers in than this one has. Remember what I said about having a Pat McGrath palette that does a very similar thing to the Viseart? Here she is. It's the Interstellar Icon Quad that they did for a limited edition collection a couple of years ago. It only has one matte, and then everything else is these lovely grungy, murky shimmers. I love a murky shimmer. So this really comes together really well with just 4 shades. You can do a completely grunge toned look. You can layer these together, creating different looks every single time. I really like the way this works. And number 11 is a newer to me palette, which I was like, I actually quite like this. Yes, it has bright pops of orange in that I'm not a huge fan of because orange is not my shade. But the Wicked Widow Beauty Tales of Terror A Haunting palette actually has some really stunning shades in. This is really nice and murky. You get the purples, you get the greens, you get the browns, and then some pops of like brighter green and orange. Like it does really work. It does really work. And in terms of like having murky shimmers in, do you see this? It's like a bronzy brown, but then it has these like pinky purple flecks in. It's really, really stunning. So this palette has a couple of things I really enjoy. There are also some downsides, which is why I didn't make it into the top 10, but this was a pleasant surprise to me when I tried it. In my top 10, I think there are going to be quite a few of the usual suspects, you could say, and I think you can already predict my number 1. Let's be real here. My number 10 is going to be the Paris Étoile. They are bringing this back. And someone mentioned in my comments that it's actually going to be a 12 pan now. I didn't have any images of that yet, so it just looked like they were relaunching this little 8 pan, but this is really beautiful. It is more like smoky, but it does have like purples in here, and also this teal, and this has some really beautiful shimmers in. This really nicely comes together, and yes, it can be just a smoky eye, but especially if you work the purples and the teals together, this is going to give you this really beautiful grungy, glammed up look. It's really pretty, and that's why I feel something like this, for instance, is better than the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge, because this does have those colorful shades in that I like having in these grungy color stories. Number 9, they've just announced their latest rendition of their Halloween palettes, the Witchcraft Salem palette, I believe it's called. This is the original, the Nomad Haunted Europe. I keep the boxes for my Nomad palettes if they're different, because very often the palette isn't the same as the box. So that's why I keep them. But here it is. This is the packaging. They still do this. They've brought it back several times. I'm not sure if they're going to continue bringing it back. And then I look at it, I'm like, oh, didn't we also get like pumpkin orange in the new palette and like cool tones on the other? And I'm like, maybe they're sort of repeating themselves a little bit with the new palette. But I do think there are brighter oranges and greens in that one. I feel that the new Nomad palette is actually looking quite similar to me in the way I've seen it being presented in pictures as the Wicked Widow Beauty palette I already have. That's why I'm passing up on it. But this was one of the original favorites. You have these like murky, greeny, sort of pumpkin-y kind of shades, and then these really beautiful, like, cooler toned berries and stuff. This is just a really good, muted, colorful color story that has a little bit of interest, but that's never overpowering, and that's why I like this one. Number 8, I think one of the best grunge eyeshadow palettes ever made. I don't think they've ever brought it back since, they've brought it back several times, so if you didn't have a chance to get it, then by now it's like your own fault, but I don't think they will be bringing it back again. But the Melt Muerte, where would we be in the world of grunge toned makeup without this? It does have some brighter pops of color, but I feel they go really well with a lot of these murky shades here in the middle. My favorite look to do is with these blues and this like gray tone that it has. That's sort of like my ultimate smoky navy, like navy smoky eye, you could say. You can see that I've used this blue shimmer quite a bit. That has quite a dent in. But surprisingly, these like wine colored shades are really good too. And the wine colored shades work really well with the green tones. So this has everything that I could possibly want. I never got the Vita shades because those were just like bright pops of color, which I wasn't really interested in, but this is truly something unique and different. I don't feel any other brand has come out with something like this ever again. I already showed you Subculture. The more updated version for me for Subculture is Fantasy Cosmetica's The Druid. I feel that this is one of their grungiest color stories to date, and this was their first palette. I got it way, way early and now has this really pretty ornate sort of stained glass packaging, but this is what they started off with. You get 4 mattes, everything else is shimmer, and the shimmers have shifts and are really pretty. That's why I like this one a little bit better than a Subculture. I get the multi-chromes in here that I normally substitute into the Subculture. This is in my Shop My Stash for September, so you will be seeing at least one look with this before the end of the month. And this is just something I really wanted to go back to because I do really enjoy this color story. Also in my Shop My Stash, I just selected a bunch of my favorite like grunge tone color stories for this month. This is the Unearthly Fall Magic palette, and this is so, so pretty. This is what I would want most grunge color stories to be. There are neutrals, so you can do a really basic look with this. There are pops of color with this as well, but then you also have these really pretty grungy, murky looking mattes, but nothing here is boring. Nothing is just going to make this a glam look like with the Huda Beauty palette. This is always going to add that a little bit of interest that makes me really want to try grunge toned eyeshadow palettes. That's what makes them unique in my book, and this one has it all. So that was number 6. We're moving on to number 5, and number 5 is my Cheer Yep Floating Life, Fleeting Life palette. I don't know. I have been complaining that a lot of grunge eyeshadow palettes tend to be more warm-toned leaning, but this and also my next option are going to show you that you can do grungy cool tones as well, and this palette has it down to a T. You get these like purpley tones here, some grays with browns over here, and then you have that red in the middle. It just can't be beat. And this shimmer right here is actually a holographic shimmer, so it has a lot of like interest in the different shimmers you get in here. Really beautiful quality, amazing, amazing payoff, good mattes, really good shimmers. I think this is one of the best grungy color stories I have in my entire collection, which is why it's number 5. Number 4, Nomad, Ghost Town, USA. So this is the one they did last year or the year before that. I don't remember. Here they've stuck to the same sort of concept as the other palette, where it's like this image that can move. And this is again a little bit more cool tone leaning. We do get some like neutral shades here, but it goes quite deep, and then you have these really lovely desaturated greens and bluey teals. I live for this side of the palette. It's just absolutely stunning. This is my favorite Nomad palette to date. You get a row of shimmer, row of matte, row of shimmer, row of matte, etc. And just everything here works together so, so well. You can do a really basic look with this if you want, but it's those desaturated greens and blues that really make this palette for me. And I'm not sure if this is a little high up. I kind of feel it is, but Nomad by Juvia's Place. This is that palette that I like better than the Gemini by Melt. And that's because it just has this shimmer in the middle. That shimmer makes this palette for me. Look at that. And also this like murky, like deeper cocky green shade. And it has more of like a green tone vibe to it almost than the Melt one has. So the Melt has 4 greens in. In here you essentially only get 2 true greens, but this is a brown with a green undertone. This is a really pretty cool brown that if you blend it again has a hint of green to it. So I feel that this almost comes together a little bit better once I apply it to my face. And I especially love like this side of the palette, but I do sometimes use these yellows to sort of set up the look. And also this works really well as a crease shade actually with those other shades. If I just want to soften things or make it look a little bit less intimidating, then it definitely works that way. Is this still available? I don't think so, but this is just such a good color story. Again, I just know sometime in October or November, this is gonna go into a Shop My Stash for sure. And then number 2, also discontinued. This entire brand no longer exists, but I have to put it up here this high because it is such a good grunge color story, and I haven't seen a single brand ever since this was released do a color story like it. It's the Michelou Witchcraft palette. And in here, You get these really grungy, deep greens. I feel like some of these greens are actually similar to the ones in the Klarity Cosmetics, so maybe I can throw away the dark green, because this green is pretty much the same as in the Klarity Cosmetics one, I feel. But then this also has these like purples, and then especially this shade here. It's such a beautiful duochrome. I feel like a brand like Fantasy Cosmetica could take an idea like this and just run with it. Because I think they don't have a witch themed palette yet, so that could perhaps be something that they might want to do. But yeah, this comes together so beautifully on the lids. It's sort of woodsy, murky, mysterious, has beautiful shimmers in. It just has a lot going for it, and I feel no other brand has done anything like it since. But my number one, of course, Poison Garden by Bella Beauty Bar. Ever since I tried this last year, and I can't wait to see what some of these brands are going to do for the fall time this year, I've just fallen in love with the brand. It's got neutrals, it's deep, dark, and mysterious. It has warmth, it has cool tones, it's got brighter pops of colors, it's got rosy tones. This is a little bit more green leaning. This is what I want every grunge eyeshadow palette to be by now. Like, murky, desaturated colors, but with some brighter pops, a little bit of warmth to make it appeal to the masses, because let's be real here, cool tones do not appeal to the masses. It's got some color, but not too much, and then just beautiful, beautiful shimmers. So yeah, I really enjoy the Poison Garden palette from Bella Beauty Bar for sure. And those are all of the palettes I wanted to chat about with you today. Let me know in a comment down below what your favorite grunge color story is. I would love to know. So thanks for joining me here today, and I hope to see you again really, really soon in a new video. Bye-bye.